So I moved into this chill apartment a little while back, and it was like my own little corner of peace and quiet. That was until this super weird dude moved into the place across from me, 213. This guy was kind of a creep, Not very old, but he looked kind of run down, and his eyes always had this freaky sparkle when you caught them in the light. He didn't talk much, but man, his stare made my skin feel like it was crawling with ants. And at night, he'd make all these weird sounds, like someone talking low, stuff being dragged, and this really unsettling laughter that got under my skin. Then, one night, something slammed against the wall so hard it jolted me awake. That silence that followed, though, it was so quiet it was loud, if that makes any sense. I probably should have just stayed put, but nope, I had to play detective. I sneaked a peek outside my door and saw his was cracked open. There was something dark and sticky on the floor by his place, and the door kind of creaked like it was inviting me over. Against all better judgment, I crossed the hall and poked my head into his apartment. The place smelled like rusty pennies and something rotten. It was a total mess inside, and that's when I spotted this huge mirror lying against the wall, all smashed, with red stuff dripping down from the crack. I suddenly felt like someone was watching me. I whipped around, nothing there, just the door, I swear, I'd left open snapped shut. Then the room filled with whispers and the lights started to flicker like crazy. I freaked out, raced to the door, yanked and shoved until it finally flew open, and I stumbled out into the hall. I bolted into my apartment, locked the door, and tried to call someone, anyone, but my phone was dead. It was pitch black when suddenly his creepy classical music started playing again from across the hall. The next morning, daylight made it all seem like a bad dream, but the dude's door was closed and everything was quiet. I asked my landlord about the guy, and he looked at me like I'd grown a second head. He said no one had rented 213 for months after some tragedy with the previous guy and some creepy mirror. I don't know what's up with 213. Sometimes I think I made it all up, but I still get this twisted feeling every time I walk by the door. And sometimes I still hear faint music like someone's still there, maybe waiting for the clock to hit 3-3. I can't explain any of it, but let's just say I keep a nightlight on these days, and I'm thinking about looking for a new place to live. Who would have thought that an empty apartment could be so terrifying, right? I remember the first day I saw the E4 rent sign in the window of the cute little house next door. Being the friendly neighbor type, I eagerly awaited to see who would move in. Maybe it'd be someone I could share a coffee with on Sundays. But what happened after they moved in is something I still can't wrap my head around. It was a family that seemed normal enough. A mom, a dad, and their 2 kids, a boy and a girl, both under 10. They introduced themselves with warm smiles and gratitude that masked a weariness in their eyes. They seemed relieved, almost too relieved, to have found a new home. Everything was fine for the first couple of weeks. We exchanged pleasantries, discussed lawn care, all that neighborly stuff. Then, things started to get weird. It began with these thumping noises at odd hours. I'd wake up to the sound of something heavy hitting the floor over and over, like a rubber ball bouncing in the attic. Kids will be kids, I thought to myself. Until one night, I was up late, watching TV and heard the most bone-chilling scream coming through the wall. I paused my show, heart racing, and strained my ears against the wall's cold surface. Silence. Then a soft whisper crept through, so faint I could barely make it out. Get out it, breathe. I bolted upright, sure I was imagining things. I went to the window, and that's when I saw it. The silhouette of the little girl, standing motionless in her dark bedroom, as if she was staring out the window, but it wasn't right. She was staring right at me. Nearly jumped out of my skin when there was a sudden pounding at my front door. Rapid, desperate. The clock glowed 3:18 a.m. The dad from next door burst in as soon as I cracked the door open, his eyes wild, sweat dripping from his brow. He rambled on about something incoherent about the walls, about voices he couldn't stop hearing. The house, it's cursed, he stammered with frenzied eyes. He grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight. Please, you gotta help us move out. Tonight, right now, stunned but eager to help, I threw on some clothes and rushed over. Their belongings were already packed. I hadn't even noticed them preparing to leave. Without asking questions, I helped them load up their car with everything they could fit. The rest, they said, they'd leave behind. As we worked, the dad kept glancing nervously back at the house. flinching at noises I couldn't hear. His fear was infectious, and soon I was hearing faint whispers where there was only silence. Or were they just imagined? The rest, the mother insisted, had to stay. "It's attached to them," she said, voice trembling as she gestured to the furniture and the remaining boxes. With everything of importance crammed into the car, the dad thanked me. He said they were heading to his brother's place, a few towns over, said it had to be far away from this house. As we said our goodbyes, I watched them drive off, the car disappearing into the inky pre-dawn darkness. The silence they left behind was almost as unsettling as the whispers. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake off the feeling of that night. The for rent sign appeared again in the window of the little house next door. Its innocent appearance belied the terror I'd witnessed. I kept my distance, but sometimes at night I thought I could hear faint thumping, like the echo of a rubber ball bouncing somewhere far off. I told myself it was just the wind or maybe the pipes, but those rational explanations did little to ease the chill that would settle over me. One evening, a couple of weeks later, as I was bringing in the trash bins, I noticed the front door of the cursed house standing slightly open. A shiver ran down my spine. I debated whether to close it or call the landlord, but curiosity got the better of me. I approached the door, my heart pounding, and gave it a push. The house was as silent as a grave. I called out a tentative hello, but only silence greeted me back. As I made my way through the living room, the stillness was oppressive. Every small sound I made seemed amplified. I reached the dining room where a few pieces of furniture and boxes were left to gather dust. For a split second, I thought I saw a shadow dart across the wall, but when I spun around, there was nothing out of place, just my own heartbeat thumping loudly in my ears. I decided it was time to leave, but as I turned to go, a cold breeze swept through the house, sending a stack of papers fluttering to the floor from one of the boxes. I hesitated, then bent down to pick them up. Amongst them, a photo caught my eye, a picture of the family that had lived there, smiling as if nothing was wrong. But on the back, scribbled in hasty handwriting, were the words "never alone." I dropped the photo as if it burned, sprinted out of the house, and didn't stop until I was safely inside my own home once more. I called the landlord, and through an unsteady voice, urged him to properly seal the house until he figured out what to do with it. See, that night as I lay in bed, I thought about the family. They had seemed so normal, so kind. I wondered what they were running from, whether they found their peace, and if I might one day find mine despite what lived in the whispering walls of the empty house next door. So, there was this guy in my building. Everyone called him Neighbor Ned. Dude kept to himself, always nodding a quiet hello without stopping for chit-chat. His place was 3 doors down from me, and I'd sometimes catch a whiff of his strong, spicy cooking when I walked by. One Tuesday night, or was it Wednesday? My mind's a bit foggy on that. Anyway, it was late, and I was chilling with some video games when a loud bang shook my walls. It sounded like it came from Ned's place. Probably dropped his woke or something. I mumbled and kept on playing. It wasn't until the next evening when I saw police tape across Ned's door that I got that sinking feeling. Cops were all over, and there was this buzz of whispers among my neighbors in the corridor. No one knew what had gone down, and the cops weren't spilling. Days turned into a week, and still no sign of Ned. The cops had split, the tape was gone, and his door stood shut like nothing ever happened. But the rumor mill was churning. Stories ranged from mundane to straight-up whack. Like one dude swore Ned had been part of some secret underground spy network. It ate at me. Curiosity's my worst trait, I guess. So one night, when the hall was dead quiet, I got brave, or stupid. I went to Ned's door and listened. Nothing. The silence was thick. I pressed my ear closer, and that's a subtle vibration, like a muffled hum, right through the door. Legit spooked. I was about to bail when the floor creaked behind me. I damn near jumped out of my skin, whirling around to find Emessa Patterson from 4B standing there with her cat in her arms, looking at me with those judgy eyes. "What are you doing, son?" she hissed, wrinkling her nose at me. "Nothing, Miss P," I stammered. "Just thought I heard something." Heard what? Ghosts? She scoffed. "Get yourself to bed." I chuckled it off, said good night to old Mims, P, and headed back to my place. But I didn't sleep a wink that night. The hum I'd felt stuck with me, playing on loop in my brain. Next day, unable to shake the vibes, I took it upon myself to ask our super about getting into Ned's apartment. Told him I was worried about leaks, mold, you name it. Surprisingly, He bought it and agreed to do a quick checkup. We set a time, and he jangled his keys as we stood in front of Ned's door. When he swung it open, a stale, musty smell hit us. Dust motes danced in the stripes of sunlight that cut through the closed blinds. Everything seemed normal, too normal, like a staged kind of normal. No signs of a struggle, no eerie, nothing. We were about to leave when I noticed something off. A small, square panel, slightly ajar in the hallway. "What's that?" I pointed. Never noticed that before," the super muttered. He fetched a screwdriver, twisted some screws, and the panel came off with a pop. Behind it was darkness, and for a second we heard it, the hum, low and haunting. We exchanged nervous glances, but before we could investigate, the super's walkie-talkie crackled to life, and he was called away for some emergency. I peered into the black hole left by the panel's removal. It seemed to stretch back into nothingness, a void in the structure of the building itself. The hum was gone again, but the air felt charged, heavy with secrets. I replaced the panel, uneasy thoughts swirling in my head. That night, and for many nights after, I lay awake, wondering. If Ned had discovered this secret spot, what had he found, what had he heard? I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever led to Ned's disappearance was still there, hiding behind the walls, just waiting to be uncovered again. It hung over the building like a shadow, silent, ever-present, and as mysterious as neighbor Ned himself.